We acknowledge the first Australians as the traditional custodians of the continent, whose culture is the oldest living culture in human history. We pay our respects to elders, past, present and emerging, and we respect their cultural heritage, beliefs and relationship with the land. We extend our respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people here today. They share the memories, traditions and hopes of the traditional ancestors with the new generations today and in the future. We would also like to thank them for looking after this land for thousands of years.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the What's in Your Backyard session of the Virtual Schools event. It's great to have you all here today. If you're anywhere in Sydney or New South Wales, it is very cold this morning, but hopefully we'll have some fun this morning as well. So please put your questions in the Q&A as we go forward. So I've got a few fun things to show you here today. Let's see if he's paying attention this morning. We're going to finish off giving my frog some morning tea. I think he's just warming up at the moment. Let's see if he'll say hello to the camera. This is a green tree frog. We're going to have a little bit about frogs and maybe if you could find them in your backyard. Well, so I've got some other things here. This might be a good chance, everyone, if you wanted to put it in. Maybe this one you can just put in the Q&A. What we call it when an animal blends into the background. So I've got one spiny leaf stick insect here that I put against some nice green leaves so it stands out. But you may also have noticed that I've got another stick insect here. This one here is called a crown stick insect. And just imagine that they're hiding up a tree about 10 metres with lots of sticks and brown leaves and those kinds of things as well. It's very, very hard to see. So I wonder if anyone wants to pop it in the chat, the word we use when an animal blends into the environment when we can't see them very well. Let's have a think to see what comes through with that one. So a lot of what we're looking at today is the kinds of things that you might find in your backyard. And I've just seen something in the chat about what are their names. I actually don't have any names for my stick insects here, probably because I've got so many. And I do like to sort of give them away and take them to schools and all sorts of things. So I tend not to name them. I do have my favourites. There's some of them that have different colour patterns that are my favourites. But I don't have any names for them. So, but I've got the two species, the spiny leaf insect and the crown stick insect. And Alice has just popped in the chat there that the word we're looking for is camouflage. So that's a really good one to remember if you haven't heard it before. And it's all about an animal blending into the environment. So today we're going to explore lots of things in my backyard, but also lots of things that you might find that maybe it's just a clue that you might see, that it's not maybe a whole thing. We've also got Charlie and I think it's Tracy and Bongo Public School have also said camouflage. So well done, everyone. We're going to look at some of the things that you might find in your backyard that give you a clue to some of these animals that might be around. So sometimes it's not what you expect. You might not see the animal. You might hear it. You might see a feather that gives you a clue you've got a bird around. You might find poo. Sometimes poo is the clue, and it can help you identify different types of animals. So let's have a look through at some of our slides, and we'll see what we can see. Okay. So this is my backyard, everyone. So I like to share a first picture of my backyard and the things that I like to look at. So I've got a few different things in my backyard to help encourage native wildlife. So right up in the back corner, there's actually what we call an insect hotel. I've got a frog hotel here. So lots of places that provide shelter. And I've also got lots of some natives, but also some not native plants and grasses as well. So lots of habitats for animals to hide in as well. And I like to call this section of my garden my spider garden. And these are some of the tiny things that I sometimes find in my spider garden. So if everyone has a look at their pinky fingernail, that's how big this spider was. So very, very small. And that's why things like those insect hotels, spiders can hide in there as well. And it provides just a safe habitat from other things that may be trying to have them as their lunch. Now, this might be one that you can pop in the Q&A in the chat as well, if you've seen this before and what you think it is. So this is a classic clue that you might find around as the weather is warming up, that you've got information that there's something coming. There's two clues for this one that's excellent. Oh, we've got someone else saying a cicada shell. Ooh, we've got cicada shell and a few other things as well. Excellent. So it is a cicada exoskeleton or a cicada shell. And these are left behind when the animal comes out from under the ground, and they can spend 7 to 10 years underground. So that's probably older than some of you that are with us today. There's one type of cicada in North America that is underground for 17 years. So I'm sure that's older than all of you as well. So they are underground, they're sucking sap off roots to get energy, and after this certain period of time, they come up out of the ground. So sometimes you see the holes, the burrows that they've come out of the grass or the ground. Sometimes you might see the shell there. If you're really lucky, you might actually see one coming out of the shell as well. But most of the time, it's the shell that gives you a clue that those animals are around. Now, there is another thing as well. Cicadas are the loudest insects in the world. So a lot of the time, it is also the sound that gives you information that cicadas are around. Now, I also think it's a big clue that the weather's warming up, that we're coming into summer when we start seeing all the cicadas as well. Excellent. Well done with that one. This is something very different. I find a lot of these in my garden, especially in a particular type of hedge in my front yard that's made up of a native plant called lily-pilly. And I find lots of these. It's about the size of a 20-cent piece. I wonder if anyone's seen, oh, we've got someone mentioned saying it could be a cocoon. So a cocoon or a chrysalis is something that, say, a butterfly or a moth will use to go through their big change, what's called a metamorphosis. And they go from being a caterpillar to an adult. And this isn't a cocoon, but it does look very similar. I like what you're thinking. It's actually an egg sac of a praying mantis. Let's see if we can have a look. So again, looking at your pinky fingernail, everyone. This is about the size of this praying mantis when it hatched out. Very, very small. Now, unfortunately, this one I found in my spider garden, and I got a couple of photos with my special lens that helped me take close-up pictures, but then I didn't see it again. Now, I do have a fair few praying mantis in my garden, so I know that out of this egg sac, it's not just one egg. There are hundreds of eggs inside this foamy mass, and then they hatch out. So lots of animals will have lots of young in these egg sacs or lay lots of eggs, so many of them will survive because there are a lot of predators in your backyard. Some of them are just very small. So think about that really tiny spider we saw at the beginning. It probably could eat that very tiny praying mantis. But once the praying mantis grows up, it probably would eat the spider. Okay, so this is what a praying mantis looks like. This is actually one of the praying mantis I found in my garden. So this one here was not very big. If you imagine just the length of your pinky finger was about the size of this praying mantis. Some of them can get as big as your hand, but this one is a lot smaller. You can identify praying mantis by these triangular shaped head, these big eyes. They've got fabulous antennae, and they've got their chewing mouth parts at the corner of their triangle-shaped head. They've also got these amazingly long legs that flick out to help catch their food. So that's one of the ways you can tell them apart from, say, a grasshopper or even a stick insect. These ones as well are hunters. So they're carnivores or really insectivores. So they'll go out and they'll eat things like spiders, they'll eat insects. Even a really big praying mantis could actually eat one of those little garden skinks that you might see. So sometimes these invertebrates, animals that don't have backbones, can actually eat some of our vertebrate animals like little lizards and even little frogs. Now this is one of my favourite. Again, I found these in that lily-pilly hedge, so a native hedge in my front yard, and I've found these a few times. I wonder if anyone has seen something like this before. If you think you know what it is, pop it in the chat. While you're doing that, Luke and Penny are just asking if praying mantis have claws. They don't have claws quite the same way as you think of maybe sort of a cat does or an animal that's sort of digging, but they certainly do have spines. So at the end of their very long sort of fingers, they've got these sort of spines that help them hold and grasp their food. So not quite claws, but certainly very spiky legs. Oh, Charlie's seen one of these before. A few people are mentioning it's a cocoon. And it is a cocoon. It's actually a special cocoon of an animal called a case moth. And this is one that I had living in my, with my stick insects actually, when I collected it. So they're actually a type of caterpillar that would then grow up into a moth. But a lot of these ones will never go through that metamorphosis. They actually live in the cocoon. So they make it out of silk. It actually looks like he's wearing a fuzzy jumper. So that's made by the caterpillar. And what they do, they come out of there, they munch on the leaves, and they munch on little sticks, and then they stick with the silk, so they're almost sewing it to the outside of their cocoon. So if we look at it, we can see all of those little bits of stick are attached and sewed to the silk cocoon. And then the top of it closes up here, and then we can see the caterpillar coming out there when it wants to feed. When it doesn't want to feed, it goes back in and it actually closes up the top of the cocoon there and can stay in there for quite a while. They are quite interesting, I have to say, and I do love finding them in my yard. And you can get these ones. The one I had was about the length of your hand, the cocoon. Sometimes they're a lot shorter as well. So sometimes I've seen them on trees or fences as well. But this one I was finding inside my hedge. Now I've got a question from Charlie. How long can a spiny leaf insect live for? Well, the spiny leaf insects, let's just stop sharing and have a little look for a moment. This one here is about probably 4 or 5 months old. She will double in size. Now, I know she's a girl because she's extra spiny. The boys, when they get adults, they end up having wings, so and they're not nearly as spiny. So she's probably about half the size. They can live for up to 18 months in captivity. In the wild, it's a lot less because they make a very good snack for birds, even possums, praying mantis, all sorts of things. And especially when they're very young, that's why they have lots and lots of eggs. So a female could lay hundreds of eggs in her lifetime to make sure some of them survive. The crown stick insects, I think, can live around the same amount of time. I've certainly had some that have lived for about a year. But because I've got so many, it's hard to tell exactly who's living the longest. But they can, they're a relatively long-lived insect. Generally, the bigger the animal, the longer it lives for. So even in the insect world, these are relatively big, so they live for a bit longer than some of the others. So great question there from Luke and Penny as well, is what is the silk made of? Now, I actually don't know. I'm sure it's different material than, say, the spider silk, but it is still a particular, something really specific to that type of caterpillar. So I think there's a lot of things like proteins and those kinds of things into it. But you know what? I'm going to do a bit of research after the session. And when I send out follow-up information, I'll see if I can have an answer for that for you. That's a really great and interesting question. Okay, let's keep going and see what animal clues we have next. Okay, now this is certainly a common one in the east coast of Australia. I'm not sure where other people are from. I know, Charlie, you're in South Australia. Have you seen anything like this before? I find lots of these near where I live. And scientists give them these, lots of these animals what we call a scientific name, which is kind of a really complicated name. But then we give them what's called a common name that we use really easily. Now, this one is called a leaf curling spider. So we've got some clues. The fact that we've got spider web in the background gives us a clue that it's probably a spider. We've also got this curled leaf in front of it as well. Now, leaf curling spiders do this for extra shelter. So not just the protection of the web, they have this shelter as well. So when the leaf is green, they kind of chew it off with their mouth parts, and then they use, again, another one using silk to stitch the green leaf. And as it they stitch it, it curls. Now, you can do that when the leaf is green, but when it dries, it actually stays in that shape, and there'll be a spider living inside there. Sometimes you can just see the legs sticking out. Now, again, maybe this time using your thumbnail as an example, that's about how big this spider gets. So they're quite small. Yes, Charlie thinks that they do have these ones in South Australia as well. So these are one of my favourites. I remember taking my kids to school a couple of years ago, and I was counting them. In less than a kilometre from my home to the school, I counted 87 leaf curling spiders. So they're becoming a lot more common, I think, certainly in urban and backyard environments. This is one in my spider garden. I was able to get a photo down the curl of the leaf, and we can actually see the spider abdomen there. So that sort of more roundy shaped part of the spider with the stripes. So it's got a big stripe down the middle and little stripes coming around the curve. But often that's what you see, just the legs sticking out the bottom of the leaf. Now, Charlie was just mentioning before about being, if you keep silkworms, that you can actually boil up the cocoons, and that is how they actually do make silk. So silkworms was something that has been used all around the world to make silk fabric. So whether or not the silk is made of is what I'm not sure, but they certainly, with the silkworms, would actually breed them to make the silk fabric. And they have been doing lots of research into spider silk, and they've been doing some work with making fabric out of spider silk as well. Okay, now everyone knows what this is. This is your classic caterpillar. This was found outside my front door on a particular type of plant. Now, it's tricky with caterpillars because some people are not sure whether they're an insect or not because of these extra legs. Now, I'm going to give you a clue, everyone. Caterpillars absolutely are insects because they turn into butterflies and moths. But these ones here, they're the actual legs. These parts are not real legs. They're fake legs that the caterpillar uses to move around. Oh, and we've also got Luke and Penny. They've seen them, maybe think they've seen them before in Victoria, those leaf curling spiders as well. Now, the clue with caterpillars could be not finding the whole thing, but finding the munch marks out of the leaves. So we can see the caterpillar eating here. So what would be left behind is this leaf with little marks out of it. Now, the stick insects do that too. So there are lots of sort of insects that eat plants that can give you a clue by what's left behind of the plant. Sometimes you might see the whole caterpillar as well. Sometimes they stand out really bright like this. Other times they're using camouflage to hide. Other times you might see this beautiful chrysalis or a cocoon. Now, I was able to identify this particular caterpillar by this chrysalis because it was so shiny. So sometimes you can describe the caterpillar or describe the chrysalis to give you information and to find out where they're from. Sorry, I'll just go back to the chat. We had a couple more questions. Oh, it's a double-headed caterpillar from Manila Central School. So you've seen one like that before. Excellent. Well, this is the butterfly it turns into. Again, I was very lucky. Sometimes you need to be in the right place at the right time with a camera to capture some of these things. So I was able, over this period of about 2 to 3 weeks, to see the whole process of the life cycle of this caterpillar turning into a butterfly. And I'll send you a video of it after the session as well. So I was lucky that there were actually 2 caterpillars. So first of all, I saw the chrysalis of one caterpillar, and then I was able to find the second caterpillar. So I was able to sort of back and forth between the 2 to get the whole life cycle. And this was the butterfly, and it was about the size of your hand with its wings spread, just after it had come out of the chrysalis. And it needed to dry its wings. And it's the best time to get a photo of these animals because they can't fly away yet. They need to stay still and dry their wings, sometimes for a couple of hours before they're able to fly away safely. And we've got a few people that have seen one like this before. Excellent. It's a really cool butterfly. Now, think about the water for this one. This is one, again, from my backyard. I have to say this photo isn't from my backyard, but the next photo is. Now, have a look around the eyes. That's going to hopefully give you the clue. Now, this is an animal that spends the first part of its life in the water, the second part of its life on land. I won't give you too much of a clue about whereabout because it'll give it away. Now, these guys are super awesome. When they're in the water, they can breathe through their bums. But what they can also do is they can push water out of their bum and move through the water. So they're jet propulsion, which is awesome. Well, I think this is one of my favourite insects, everyone. I just had a question there about my favourite insect. Yes, we've got Wongonum Public School has said that it's a dragonfly. And Great One Charlie Water Boatman, that is another one that does live in the water, but they stay in the water the whole time. This one here is a dragonfly. So this is one that hatched out in my backyard frog pond. And again, I was just really lucky to see it just as it needed to stay still to dry its wings. But I think it's the eyes that give the information away. To have a look there. So if you had a little freshwater creek or pond, you can go do something called dip netting and look for some of the animals that live in the water. But the clue would also be, if you see dragonflies flying around, you know that they must be living somewhere nearby in the local water source. The dragonfly's wings seem so delicate. That's from Luke and Penny. Absolutely, they really do. But they are quite strong. And they pretty much, these guys will fly around. And if you didn't realise, they are hunters, both in their larval or nymph form in the water. They are predators and when they're flying around as well. So what they're doing is they're flying around and they're trying to scoop lots of tiny little flying insects into their mouth as they're flying around. So I love it every couple of years or so. So last year was a particularly great year for dragonflies at my place. Oh, yes, we've got Manila Central also recognised it as a dragonfly. Well done, everyone. Now, let's move into some big things. We talked about camouflage as well. We've got this guy absolutely doing great camouflage in here. Hopefully, we can all see this one. Now, I'm going to play a call for this one. So sometimes it's what we hear that gives us a clue that there's something around. Oh, lots of you have noticed it's a frog. We've got a mud frog. Yep, and it is hiding. This one is actually called a striped marsh frog, and they love hiding in gardens. So not all frogs like my green tree frog can fly. Lots of frogs will actually spend a lot of time on the ground. Let's have a listen. So that talking noise, I'm going to play it again. That weird talking noise, or the is actually the sound of the frog call. Now, lots of people don't think that they're a frog. So most frogs, and in Australia, I think there's 242 different species of frogs across Australia. Each species has a different call, and we can identify them by those calls. I'm going to come back to the striped marsh frog in a minute. So this one here is a frog that I find in my garden most called the Perrin's tree frog. And again, it's a relatively big frog. So both the striped marsh frog, the Perrin's tree frog, and the green tree frog here can be sort of the size of the palm of your hand. Most frogs are very small and brown and very small and green and are really hard to see. Most of them, again, if you look at your thumb as a size, between your knuckle and the tip of your thumb, most frog species are only that size. So they can be really hard to find, but some of them are super noisy and much easier to hear. Oh, wow. We've got a school here that is up in the Snowy Mountains or the Kosciuszko nearby and are part of the breeding program of the corroboree frog. That's so fabulous. Oh, sorry, not the corroboree frog, the Burralong frog. Absolutely, there are lots of wonderful breeding programs that are happening with communities and a lot of the zoos and wildlife parks to try to protect our frogs. So I hadn't heard of the Burralong frog before, but certainly the corroboree frog, the beautiful yellow and black one, is another one they're doing great breeding programs. But certainly the green tree frog, the Perrin's tree frog, and the striped marsh frog are considered quite common, and they do quite like hanging out in your backyards. So let's have a listen to some of the calls as well. Let's do the green tree frog. Now, I think the green tree frog is your classic frog call. You know, frogs don't go croak, they don't go la-di-da-di-da, but they do have some really interesting calls. There's a frog in Western Australia called the rocket frog. There's another frog called the motorbike frog, because that actually sounds like a motorbike revving up. So some of them are really, really strange. Now, let's try both of these frog calls. We're going to start with the striped marsh frog call. Now, I do it by putting my tongue at the roof of my mouth and making that talking sound. So whether you're at home or whether you're in the classroom, I want everyone to try to make as much noise as you can, making a frog chorus, because it's usually not just one frog, it's many frogs. So let's try it. Ready? Excellent. So I love this particular frog because I used to work at the Australian Museum, and we'd have so many people call up saying, there's a strange animal sound in my backyard. I don't know what it is. It's very strange. And they'll describe this talking noise. And that would be the striped marsh frog. So it was really easy to identify because of its interesting call. But let's try the green tree frog now as well. As I said, it's not a croak, it's more of a caw. So let's try that together. Ready? Caw, 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 caw. Excellent. Now, every now and again, I think my frog will call back, but he's not calling back today, but we're keeping an eye on him. Excellent. So I'm just double checking. We've got some extra questions in the chat. Tracy Forbes, they've got the green tree frog living under their water tank. Excellent. The green tree frog used to be really common around Sydney, and we don't find it in Sydney really anymore. In the outskirts of Sydney, but it used to be common in sort of, really urban environments. But the frog that's taken over that sort of what we call sort of habitat niche is the Perrin's tree frog. And I think someone was saying it looks like it had little bumps on it, like little pimples. So the Perrin's tree frog can actually have quite a bumpy looking texture, whereas lots of other frogs can look quite smooth. Frogs can change their colour a little bit. So my green tree frog, let's have a look at him now, is green at the moment, but sometimes he'll actually go quite dark and brownish in colour and camouflaging with the background of the tank or terrarium he lives in. Also, sometimes it's to do with the weather. I've got a big shadow because of the weather here at the moment, so he's not as bright as usual. But frogs are absolutely amazing in where they can live. So some frogs, like the green and golden bell frog that was considered quite endangered, was actually living in a really quite disturbed, unnatural area that you would think frogs wouldn't like to live. Okay, so let's have a little look at the frogs, and we're going to see if we can give them a feed. So frogs are cool. They've got, it's a bit hard to see on his hand at the moment. There we go, showing a hand off there. They only have 4 fingers. Now, if I can turn him right up, hopefully not to spill the water. Let's see if we can see his legs underneath there. Oh, a bit hard to see, but he's got 5 toes. So it's a little bit different there. 4 fingers and 5 toes. And if we look again at this one here, we can see the sticky pads on his toes here that give us a bit of a clue where he might live. So the sticky pads show us that he wants to climb. He's a tree climber. So the parents tree frog, green tree frogs, any ones that have the word tree in it are usually climbers. Whereas the striped marsh frog would have sort of longer, skinnier feet because they are digging. So different types of feet and toes depending on where they live. Now, one of the things, main thing I want to show you about the frogs are they don't really have, they can't swallow very well. Their tongues, just have a think, don't stick your fingers in your mouth, but have a think, your tongue, I'll move up here. Your tongue is attached at the back of your mouth, okay? Frogs' tongues are attached at the front of their mouth, so that's why they can kind of flick them out to catch their food. But one of the things that's really important about our tongues and our mouths is we can swallow. We can swallow our food. Our tongue helps us push our food down. The other thing about frogs, if we have a little think about their mouth, our mouth is usually just a small part at the front. Their mouths, and I'll show you again in a moment, start from sort of below their ears all the way. So they can open their mouths really, really big. So they've got this really super long tongue that they can shove food in, and they've got but a tongue and a really big mouth they can put food in. So really big mouth, a tongue that's attached to the front that doesn't help them swallow. So let's have a closer look, and I'll see if our frog will have something to eat. It's a bit cold, might not eat, but I think he's hungry. So let's have a look at that mouth again. He's hiding behind his foot, but we've got his eyes there, and just behind his eyes, you can see a little circle. That's his ears. Below there is the mouth. Now, I know that this frog is a boy because he makes noise. It's the boys that will croak. So that's why I know that my stick insects are girls because they're bigger. My frogs are boys because they make croaking noises. Okay, let's see if you'll have something to eat. So what I want you to look for is when it swallows, it's going to close its eyes. Okay, look, watch the eyes. There we go, eyes closed. That's pushing the food down. There we go. Big push of the food down, and then the eyes are open again. Big showing off of his fingers there. Yeah, big swallow. That was a huge swallow. Let's see if we'll have another one. Watch the eyes. I'm going to close the lid, otherwise he jumps out. So he's using his eyes to push into his head to then push the cricket into its stomach. Let's see one. I think he's going to do one more. So he hasn't actually opened his eyes again properly yet. We've got a question about is the golden poisonous frog the world's most poisonous frog? I'm not sure about that. I know that there are a lot of poisonous frogs, certainly in South America. Oh, there we go. He's opened his eyes again now. Happy frog. So I just wanted to show that. Hopefully it wasn't too disgusting to see the frog have morning tea, but it is just such a big difference in the adaptations of those frogs as something as simple as where the tongue is attached in the body, but certainly also how big the mouth is. So frogs will eat anything they can shove in their mouth. So they can actually have a little bit of a problem with that if they can't eat it. So sometimes they do have to spit things out if they ate something that was just too big. Other times they are able to swallow it by pushing their eyes down. Okay, I've got a couple more things to show you before we wrap up today. There are lots of other animals as well that you might be able to recognise from different things. So this particular one here is a grey-headed flying fox. It's an endangered species in many parts of New South Wales, but in other places there are lots of them. But again, this is a nocturnal animal. So nocturnal meaning it's only coming out at night time. So what you might find is that you don't see it. Sometimes you might see it in a tree hanging upside down, but other times you might hear a lot of noise. Always sounds like they're having an argument. So if you've got particular trees near where you live that have at certain times of year that have lots of pollen and fruit, you may find that in different times of year you get different species of fruit that come and eat those trees. So I've got a couple of trees nearby. It's only for a couple of months a year that I have these coming to feed during the night. Might be something like a possum, brush-tailed possum, or a ring-tailed possum. Again, quite a noisy. So it's often quite a growl and a bit of a carry-on. They do like to play around, so sometimes you might hear them dropping out of a tree onto a roof and tumbling down. So they can have quite a lot of fun as well. Yes, so we've got a few people with fruit bats there. Charlie says down at Adelaide Zoo, there are hundreds of bats, maybe even thousands living there. Yeah, certainly some of the bat colonies can get very large. We had a bit of a problem in the really hot weather here in Sydney a few years ago, where the bat colonies just were getting too hot and that lots of them were dying, unfortunately. So it can be very, very difficult out in the wild for these animals to cope with extreme weather conditions, you know, really wet, really cold, really hot, especially if it's unusual for that time of year. Oh, now this is a cool one. I wonder if anyone has recognised or seen anything like this before. You can pop it in the Q&A or the chat. Oh, Luke and Penny can sometimes see possums on their roof. And Annie, Pippi and Johnny, well done. It is an owl pellet. Now, if you don't know what an owl pellet is, essentially it is owl vomit. Disgusting. So I think they're awesome. And they're really important for ecologists and scientists to actually work out what some of these birds are eating. So a lot of the owls and any essentially predatory bird, they can't digest all of the fur and the feathers and the bones from a lot of the things that they eat. So they actually need to sort of digest the good bits that they want, and then they spit up or vomit up these things that they call owl pellets. You can see that there's little bits of bone in there. Really, really important, can sometimes give scientists clues about how far these birds are travelling for their food. Really cool. Now, this particular one here is the powerful owl. They need these really old hollows in trees to be able to nest, and they're great. Let's play their call. I've got one that I hear every now and again near where I live. So it could be the sound. It's that classic sound that you get from the powerful owl. So really great one, no matter where you live in Australia. Maybe do a bit of research to find out what owls might be living near you, and listen out at night for some of your nocturnal animals of what might be around, because sometimes it's not what you're expecting. And you might have something around that is maybe endangered or rare. And then you can put those, what we call like a data set, and you can actually there's things like the Birds Australia app when they do bird counts. There's the Atlas of Living Australia. For frogs, there's a great one called Frog ID. All of these different apps can actually help scientists understand what animals are living in your backyard and beyond. So it's a great one to do if you like listening out to some of these animals, is to try to record them or note them down. Okay, this one, certain times of year, depending on where you live, it is a very loud bird. Now, I'm going to play this and just maybe you can just pop in the chat if you've heard this before. Yep, Charlie's heard it down in South Australia. Oopsie, wrong scroll. It is a coel, and they're a particularly loud bird, but they come in and, about 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning, you'll often hear this bird carrying on. We've got a few people that have heard that one as well. Okay, we're running out of time, so I'll skip through the last ones. This is a book owl, so quite a smaller owl. A common one as well is the tawny frogmouth. So this is not an owl. These are called a nightjar. They are another amazing Australian nocturnal bird, and they use their camouflage to look like a branch. Let's listen to them. A bit hard to hear, but it's like a repetitive hum almost, like it's a hoo, 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 over and over. So if you can hear that in your branches, and if you're lucky and you do hear it, have a look nearby at those trees in the morning. You might actually see the birds. They usually put their heads up, and sometimes there can be 2 or 3 of them together just pretending to be a branch. We've got Luke and Penny that have definitely heard the coel as well. Okay, now this is a good one, guys. There are 2 clues in this picture. And remember, sometimes the poo's the clue. I reckon most of you should be able to pick this one up. What animal is this? There's 2 clues here. Oh, we've got our first one come through. Luke and Penny say the tawny frogmouth is one of their favourite birds. And it sounds like a bit like an alarm. And they've also picked correctly that our animal here is a wombat. Now, the clue is the square-shaped poos. Wombats are the only animal in the world, I think, that do square poos. And we've got a few people. We've got Alice and Charlie and Bongona Public School have all correctly picked that it is a wombat. So we've got the burrow as well, and we've got the poos. And maybe a clue might have been that I flicked accidentally to the photo. So here's our wombat here. They make these square poos, and they like to make them in little towers, in little mounds, to sort of stay a bit territorial, saying this is my spot. So often on little high parts, there'll be a little pile of square poos. Now, I might finish with this one just because it is super weird. Now, I know what this is. Does anyone want to have a guess in the Q&A or the chat what animal? Got to pick through the wrong thing. What animal could be here? Oh, we've got Manila Central School, Charlie, and a few others have all said that they've recognised the wombats as well. Plenty of wombats around Bongona Public School as well. And Alice, well done. It is a spider. Manila Central School thinks it's a funnel web spider. It's not a funnel web spider, but absolutely correct picking it that it is a spider. And Bongona Public School also predicting that it's a spider. Luke and Penny going, oh, it is weird. Now, it is super weird because it's called the bird poo spider. Now, if you couldn't spot the spider, here's the abdomen. Here is the legs and another leg, and here's the head. You can even see a couple of eyes sitting there. So this spider is adapted to camouflage to look like a splodge of bird poo. Now, especially around currawong season, you might often see bird poo that's got the little red berries in it. So it's trying to essentially look like a bit of a combination of a bird poo that's maybe eaten some berries, the white's a lot of calcium, and splodged on a leaf there. And it's waiting for little flies or little insects that maybe want to eat the bird poo to be able to catch. So I wanted to finish up on that one because it is just super weird that we've got a spider specifically adapted to try to camouflage to look like poo. So sometimes it's the poo, like the square poo of the wombat, that gives you a clue that that's the animal that's around. Other times it's something pretending to be poo. That's a clue as well. Now, guys, that's the end of our session. For those of you that can stay around, please feel free. I've got time for some final questions that you can pop in the chat. But if you do need to go, thank you so much for joining me today. I will be sharing some videos and links later on this afternoon, and maybe tomorrow I will have the recording of the session as well if you wanted to have a look at any of those clues again. Okay, for those of you who need to go, no problem, but if you do have any final questions, you can just pop them in the Q&A for me. Oh, thank you very much, Bongona Public School. I'm glad you enjoyed it. It's always fun sharing what's hiding in my backyard, and for you to discover what's hiding in your backyard or your school. Excellent. Well, it looks like we have covered everything already with no more final questions. So, guys, thank you so much for joining me today, and I look forward to seeing you for the next session as well. If I know a lot of you have already booked, there is a full day of sessions on Monday for World Environment Day. So if you did want to have a look at that, I'll send you the link as well. They're all free sessions as well. Excellent, guys. See you later.